Hi everyone, this is Stephanie at Hightower Stitching with today's video. It's number 192. It's called the Inside Outside Quilt Blocks, easy to make and fun to see in a completed quilt. And what I want to do today is tell you how we got here for this project. I want to show you samples of the project and then finally the layout that you can do to make your own quilt. So let's start. It goes back to the block that I did for 190, which, if you remember, it was boxy and it was hand stitched, and it could be machine stitched, but it was a great one for hand stitching. Well, I was talking to my sister-in-law again because we were still talking about that baby quilt we want to work on, and she was taking a trip, so she said, I'm going to take and do that boxy quilt we were looking at and a hand stitch it as we go down the road. She said, but you know, I've got a quilt that's kind of similar. It makes me think of one. It was called the Inside Out quilt when she got finished with it. So here's a sample of the one that we had. It had smaller pieces. It had like 3.5 inch in the center, 1.5 inch wide on those, and then 2 inch on those. And you'll see the difference when we look at the next one. So that helped us both to get started with a new project. And this is the box, the block for the new quilt, the inside out, outside. And how this is going to be different but it's really fun. It's a 6.5 inch square in the center. That's the only place you're going to have one of those is something that big is in the centers. But all of your other blocks are going to be 3.5 inches wide. So in these, we have 3.5 inches squares. And if you look, if I remember, there were 12 squares around. And when I got ready to sew this one, I would sew these two together and add them to the block, and then come over and do the other two and then do it. Now, this is a great one for hand stitching. If you're ready for longer runs for hand stitching, or if the other one felt too tiny to you and you're just learning how to do it. It's also great for machine chain stitching also, because you can do a bunch of pairs and then fit them wherever you want them, because it's going to be sort of like a crazy quilt in a way. So that's the main block. And here's the quilt that she had made years ago. She used Minnesota fabric. They take a trip, she and her husband, periodically, and they go to Minnesota because that's where our family's from, and visit family up there. Well, they have beautiful fabrics. They're called Minnesota fabrics, really soft cottons. Well, this is the quilt that she made with those particular fabrics. And so we're going to move in, and I want to show you where the inside outside comes from. All right, if you look at this top block, you've got the outside frame going around. It's 3.5 inches wide, and then I've got the dimensions for those. But if you look at that, in the center of the block, they've divided it into 4 blocks and put those together. I did that once, but you don't have to do that. But the idea is you see the frame on the outside. Okay, now let's drop down. All right, now look where it is. The frame color is in the center of the block. And this time, instead of having a solid frame around the outside, we go back to that block I was showing you that had the 12 blocks that are 3.5 inch squares on there. And these are just great. And here's another one. And if you look at the center, you can see that pretty flower. You can see all those squares around the outside. And then I'm going to drop down because I turned it so you could see how long it was. And now if you look, the inside of the first one has now become the outside, and then the squares were put in the center. And when you see my long example, I did mine a little different because I didn't really realize those 4 squares were in the middle. And let's see, this one's a good one too. Here's one of all the material, and they're working, and then there are the blocks in the center. which you do first, and then down underneath it, that outside frame has gone into the middle, and it's that solid block. And I want to just show you too how simply this was quilted, and it was hand quilted if you were thinking about this. And I think she actually probably did it in a hoop rather than in a stand, and she just did running stitches. And even the blocks, each one of the blocks going around has got an X stitched in it, and then an X stitched in that box. And with the material that she used, it just really makes it look homey and right, if that makes sense. And then it's got a brown trim around it. Okay, now I'm coming back to the one that I did with that when I was doing my practice ones, and we talked about the first one, and here I have my block in the center. Well, then I came over and I put it around the outside, and it looks so neat because it's 3.5 inches wide. And then I just picked another complementary color that I wanted to put in there. And that was really before I realized that I could put the 4 blocks in there, but you don't have to. So that's a difference. And then it's got the sashing, and it's 3.5 inches wide and covers the boxes. All right. So here's where we're going to go. Here's that 6.5 inch. And then you're going to have your 3. Stitch those 2 together. We can stitch all the pairs together that you want to do. And then, let's see, I had this as a marked for us to do something, but I'll come back to it because I think I've already told you. And then these are the boxes. And you can just see how big it is. Now these are still have the 4th inch on them. 3.5. They've got to have that 4th of an inch seam allowance. And that takes care of that one. And then the second one has got your 6.5 inch center. And then if you choose to, and you've got some more of those pairs, look at this over here, then you can take and you can add your 4 into the inside of just mixed colors. And this would really be fun too, because for some reason I'm falling down the scrap quilt or the orphan fabric, and it makes me think of that, and that might be a fun way to use those up. All right, so now when I'm going to do the long strips for the outside, I'm going to have one that's 2 that are 3.5 by 6.5. They go on here, and I'd put those on first, the 2 sides. There's the other one. All right, and then you'd have 3.5 by 12.5 and 3.5 by 12.5. And that just takes care of your box, because then you're going to have your sashing. And your sashing is going to be the color that you want to go with your quilt. And there's going to be a lot of it, because we'll go back and look at the quilt and you can see how it makes everything stand out. But those are 3.5 inches wide and 12.5 inches long, and are sewn on the sides. Okay, so let's go back to this one for a minute. All right. So let's say that you've got your 4 blocks done and you're ready to put your rows together. So we're going to go across in rows. And you're going to take that strip and sew it between each one of them. And don't worry about doing the one on the end. No, because you're going to use a long strip out there. So just for your rows, you're going to connect them with this. And then when you get your row done, and your row's going to be nice and long, you're going to take a strip, and I figured out, see, I don't have the pattern from the book, but it's got a 3.5 inch strip that comes, and it runs all the way across there. It's really nice. You'll just start and just add it to it from one end to the other. And I was thinking it was about 5 feet something. So, but you can measure yours and see where it is. And so you'll add those between each of your rows, and you'll also add one to the top, one to the bottom, and that's where I was talking about the sides. So let's go over there and look at that one more time. I know this is going fast, but this is kind of a neat, fast project, but it's got a lot of possibilities for colors and things. So now if you'll look again, and the different pieces have been added between the blocks to go like this row. All right, and then once you get those rows done, you're going to take a long strip, and it's going to go from one part to the other. Now this is turned sideways so you can see the whole quilt really well. And it would be turned the other way. But your rows won't be that long, but your outside edges will be. So you'd have to measure that, and they're 3.5 inches wide. But this is called the Inside Outside Quilt, and it was made out of Minnesota fabric. Well, you just look in your fabric and any coordinated materials you have, or any box of those orphan fabrics that you want to bring back out, and you can have a lot of fun with this. It's called the Inside Outside. I hope you enjoyed that. I know it was quick, but it's not much to it, but you really get something that's pretty. Thank you for watching. Time codes will be in the description. Any notes I have are added to the description. If this was helpful, or you liked it, or you just like visiting, just hit subscribe and like. It doesn't cost you anything. And be free to leave comments. Thank you for watching.